The veil has finally been lifted. We now know exactly what buffs, debuffs, and control effects that are going to be present in Godforge. And in this video, I'm going to share you some of my thoughts and insights on those. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, as always, I will leave the entire video in a pinned comment down below so you can watch it without my spiel over the top. And in this one, we're not going to go over everything. We're just going to point out a few different ones that sort of stood out to me and that I found interesting. So the first thing that stood out to me was this screen right here, and it's showing us some of the drop rates of items in the cavern. Now, as you can see here, 60% of the time we're going to be getting some form of equipment. You would presume they mean gear by this. 20% of the time we're going to be getting a Olympus rare, which is kind of cool. 15% of the time it's going to be some sort of character reward. Now, what exactly that means, none of us know. 4.5% is going to be an epic, and 0.5% you're going to get a legendary. So the gacha element's still coming into effect here, but it looks like instead of pulling shards, we're simply going to have to run things over and over again. The downside to that, though, is we're going to have to be using our energy for it. It's going to cost 4 energy per battle here, which, you know, if we have 260 to start with, that even if it was 240, for example, I think that ends up being 60 runs. This will probably be, what, 65 before you run out. And if the heroes, let's say this is Olympus on floor 4, Amaya Khan's floor 5, all of that kind of stuff, my concern is, will you have enough energy and time to farm up everything that you need? You know, forgetting legendaries, you know, just to get multiple copies of epics even. You know, if there are 100 epics or 100 heroes, for example, in the game, and let's say a third of them are epics, 33, you've got a 5% chance to get one of those epics, and you've got a 1 in 33% chance to get the epic that you want. It's going to be very tough, so I'd be interested to see how this plays out, but it's still cool to see some of these drop rates right here. So first thing we see here is Simon is talking about there's going to be 3 types of things in the game: buffs, debuffs, control effects. Very standard stuff. But the cool thing here was we got to see Mordred's kit. So his basic, as you can see here on screen, he attacks a single enemy and places corrupt on them for 2 turns. Then we look at his core, which is here. So he places accuracy up on himself and then has a chance to place confuse on all enemies. Now, what I thought was cool about this is it's not a hit, it is sort of just a place, so that might have a bit of an effect when it comes to sort of accuracy, resistance, all those kind of things. Simon then moves on to show us Anubis's ultimate, and he starts talking about divinity. Now, as you can see here, to cast an ultimate you need 1,000, and he's going to start on 0. But more importantly is, I think this is different to what we've had previously. Now, if I pull up my own site that I was working on, and I bring up Anubis's page, there we are. So this is my site that I've just brought up here. We can see the ultimate has changed. So initially, way back when, however many things ago it was, he would attack all enemies and have a chance to place a drain, and he would repeat this attack on enemies of less than 50% divinity. He would gain 200 when the enemy dies, and gain 300 additional divinity if they were killed by Soul Guide. Now we don't have the drain effect. Instead, we've got barrier. So it just goes to show that there's a lot of things still working on, and things are obviously being changed on the weekly. So, you know, if you rely heavily on my site at the moment, do note that some of it likely has changed. But going back to this, so rather than placing drain now, Anubis simply has some sort of built-in lifesteal effect. if he is below 50 HP when it's cast. If he's above, then he gains a barrier, and barrier is sort of explained to us later on. He then gains 200 divinity whenever an enemy is defeated, and it doesn't specify that it is him, so if anyone is defeated, he gains 200. Double this if they are aligned with order. Now, Simon does go on to mention that they are still tweaking a lot of things, whether you start on 0, whether you start on 200, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, something that I just wanted to point out, that obviously things are still being worked on, and I actually think I prefer this one anyway, so thumbs up to the team. We then get a brief look at the definition of Brawler. So we've now seen Slayer and Invoker, I think, this being the third one being Brawler. If I'm able to get hold of this as an infographic, then I will put them all on my site, make it look nice and clean. And then Simon also shows us Chaos as well, so we've now seen Chaos as well as Order, which I thought was pretty cool. Simon then goes to talk about the stats here. Now, we have Anubis still up here, and there are a couple of key things to point out here. So the first thing you mentioned is that the attack stat is never redundant. And what I mean by that is all of the heroes in the game, their damage will scale off attack and something else. So even if it's a defense-based champ, you'll find that the attack is still used as a multiplier in one or more of their abilities, which I think is awesome. Let's say in games like Raid, even Etheria that I'm playing now, if heroes scale off defense, then you would just have no ever need for attack. At least in this way, say, if you've just got random attack rolls here and there, it's not completely useless, which I thought was great. Another thing you mentioned is that accuracy and resistance are not just for resisting buffs, debuffs, and placing them, etc. Accuracy is actually going to increase the chance that you land a strong hit, as well as buffs and debuffs, you would presume, which was really cool. And same as resistance, it actually reduces the crit damage you take when you take a hit, which again I thought was a really cool and intuitive way to make sure that these two stats aren't just, again, useless if you have them in a build just coincidentally. Lastly, he then confirms that initiative is what we think it is. It is sort of the passive tick meter of your ultimate bar, similar to the way speed works. Now, he also confirms, if we go back to Anubis's ultimate, that it affects the gain as well. So Anubis here gains 200 divinity whenever an enemy is defeated. That will increase if your initiative increases. Now, by what amount he didn't say, but it's really cool to see that it's not just the passive sort of gain of ultimate meter, it also affects this kind of thing here, which was really interesting, and I really sort of loved that. It's cool to hear that that is sort of where they are going. So again, spot on from the team once more. So then finally, the bit we've all been waiting for, the list of the status effects that are in the game. Some of them are more obvious than others, like accuracy up, accuracy down, attack up, attack down, all that kind of stuff. We're not going to go over all of that. I'm going to just talk about some of the unique ones, if you will. Now, Simon actually goes down all of the buffs and then the debuffs and disables. I'm going to work left to right. So we'll start here. Accuracy 1, 2, 3, attack 1, 2, 3. Nothing particularly exciting here, except the fact that there are 3 of them. So not just 20%, 40%, it then goes up to 60% as well. In Raid, there's only 1 and 2, as well as a lot of other games. It's really cool to see 3 here. Confused. This is a disable effect. The unit attacks a random ally with its basic ability on its turn, doing 75% reduced damage. This is a pretty cool sort of control effect. One that's sort of been hinted at for a while now, ever since Simon did a video from a YouTube suggestion way back when, but that has now been confirmed. Now, interesting that it is reducing the damage. I do think that's fair if you're forcing them to hit their own team. You know, if someone crits on basic, like imagine for those raid players, a Fenax, if you hit your own player with Fenax, you would be so annoyed. So I get the reduction of damage here. Acid. This is cool. This is their version of poison, essentially, and is on Ramses, one of the starter heroes. Now, I actually said initially Guan Yu would be my choice until we know what these other debuffs do, and now we do. And I'm starting to think maybe Guan Yu might not be the choice. We'll look at that later. But yes, it disables armor sets, which is interesting. We don't know entirely what that means. Perhaps it means the passive effects that you see on some of these armors. And it deals 5% of their max HP at the start of the turn, deals double damage to shield and barriers. Kinda cool. Despair, like a fear mechanic, you skip your next turn and you cannot receive positive buffs or effects. Duration is reduced when an attempt to receive a positive buff or effect. Now, this is interesting and what they're doing differently to a lot of other games in that once it happens, once it then disappears. That's what I'm believing it to be. So in the example, let's say it was a stun. In other games, once you're stunned, let's say this was, it said stun, skip your turn, you cannot receive this. In a game like Raid, as long as you don't take your turn, you're still stunned. Doesn't matter if an ally rotates round you and tries placing buffs on you, that's it kind of thing. It's interesting that the duration is reduced once it happens once. So you try and place attack up, it fails, then it drops off. Now, if that's the entire despair debuff or just that effect, I'm unsure. But if it is the entire effect, it reduces the need to have a cleanse, and perhaps that's something that we just don't have in the game at all. There are no purifiers or cleansers in the game. You just have to meet this requirement of attempting to place a buff and then it drops. Interesting to see where that goes from here, but very cool to see and something different that the Fateless team are doing. Moving down then, we have Barrier. Now, it absorbs incoming damage equal to the strength of the barrier before depleting HP. Barriers can stack and be increased. Now, this to me strikes me as like a shield effect, but you can stack it, you can have multiple barriers. We do also have a shield effect slightly further down, so unsure how they're going to work together, if you can have them both together. But again, another unique one that we've not seen. Now, we've seen shields before, but they specify that this can stack, and we've got shield as well, so yeah, playing around with that is going to be interesting. Aether Burn increases the target's chance to weak hit and reduces their divinity on all heroes. So again, another cool one. You're going to sort of take less damage, but also slowing down their ultimates. Now, again, what I'd be interested to know is whether you can place all three to reduce it by 18% total. I imagine not, but again, something that we're going to have to play with when the time comes. Really cool looking debuff. Freeze does what it says on the tin, but interesting, incoming turn meter fill effects are reduced by 50%. Now, is that passive turn meter as well? I imagine not, but that is incoming, so you know, I imagine not. I imagine this is just if a hero has increased target's turn meter by X. I imagine it's just that that's reduced. Morph increases battle attack stat by 20%. Now, this doesn't seem like a disable. This to me seems more like a buff. Maybe I'm understanding it wrong, but yeah, that seems like a positive effect to me. Obviously, defense up and attack down are what they say on the tin. Immortal, sort of unkillable in Raid, if you know what that means. Banish. Enemies that die with this debuff or is placed before death cannot be revived whilst this is on. When a revive occurs, the duration of this debuff is reduced. So again, really interesting debuff here. So it's essentially like a block revive. That's pretty normal. But when a revive occurs, the duration is reduced. So it seems like not a permanent thing. If you have two revivers on your team, one will reduce this banish and the other one will pick your teammate up, rather than it just being a permanent effect. Simon does say that actually not many people have this because it is a very strong effect. What I want to know is if someone dies, whether you can place it on them to prevent them from being revived again. I imagine not, reading it, but something again that I would like to play around, because it specifies placed before death. I imagine if you're dead you can't then place it, but yeah, really interesting one there. A Petrify, similar to a freeze effect, but rather than speed, it's your divinity which slows. Sleep does what it says on tin, generally one of the weaker debuffs or disables in games, but it increases incoming damage, similar to the way Etheria works. Initiative up does what it says on tin. Blaze is their version of HP burn. Again, doesn't specify, like in Rage you can only have one. Whether you can have multiple stacks of this would be interesting to see. I'd really like it if you could, because it doesn't specify like it does with Bleed I imagine not. So, although, same with acid. In Rage, you can stack multiple poisons. Acid doesn't say you can, but doesn't say you can't either. So similar questions surrounding this one. Stun and taunt. Yeah, as you can see, they are what they are. Bleed. Damage an enemy by 1% of the max HP each turn, stacks up to 10 times on subsequent applications. And this is what Lady Zoc has. This seems pretty busted and potentially the best choice for boss killing. I thought maybe Guan Yu because he had that max HP on his basic skill, but if Lady Zoc can do this, increases the damage with her passive dealt to him, this is going to be very strong if you can stack it, and I now think Lady Zoc might be my choice for a starting hero. Intercept redirects an attack. We see, I think Hercules has this. Again, but it's like a one-time use thing. Mend reduces bleed stacks by 1 and heals max HP at the start of the turn. Again, it'd be interesting to see if you can place this on yourself without bleed stacks, just like a heal over time effect. Block revive, there we go. So banish is different to block revive. So this obviously is a permanent version. Banish is not. That answers our earlier question. Blunt decreases strong hit and critical damage by X amount. Very cool. Phoenix instantly revive upon death with 100 HP and turn meter. This seems bonkers to me. It seems absolutely nutty. And I'm interested to know who has it, because they're going to be a very strong hero. I expect we see this on legendaries. Ally protection. Charm takes the next attack for the enemy that placed this debuff. Duration reduced when triggered. So I imagine that, if I place this debuff on you and then I get hit, you actually take that hit. Almost working similarly to Confuse, I imagine, but again, remains to be seen. Corruption, this is what we saw on Mordred. The unit that placed this debuff steals any buffs they receive, duration reduced when triggered. Now again, is this just one buff? If I place 3 buffs in one ability, will I steal all 3? Or will I steal the first one and then the other 2 remain on the character? Again, something that I would like to see in more detail. Radiance, I imagined was some sort of reflect. It turns out I was right. Reduces and reflects percentage of attack damage received. This seems like a very strong buff to have on you. Reflect the next non-resisted debuff received. Interesting, it specifies non-resisted, so if you take it, it doesn't work. Duration reduced when triggered. Again, only happens one time, rather than if you're controlled and you've got this, it doesn't keep reflecting different ones. It's a one-time use thing, which I see why they've done it, but also I see because it is linear across all of them. It's kind of happens once, that's it. Even on the debuffs, I would like this to not be removed once it happens once, but I guess it's been too powerful. Curse reduces healing. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now we know what it does. We don't need to go into it. Resist up, defense down. We know what they are. Retaliate, counter-attack enemies when hit. It's interesting that this doesn't remove once it happens like the others. Again, if this one doesn't, why is Reflect doing it? Don't know. Drain, we guessed would be a lifesteal effect. Turns out that it is, but also you do increased damage to the target, which I think is cool. So if Guan Yu puts Drain 2 on a boss, and then he does 5% max HP damage, does he actually do 7% max HP damage? And with his passive to deal a further percent, is it actually 8%? Something, again, I'd like to see. Sharpen raises crit damage and strong hits. Hex, he actually says, isn't this, it's something else, which I thought was cool. Initiative and shield down, we know what they are. We've got lock abilities, which I thought was cool. Increased speeds. Stalwart, immune to disable. Duration is reduced when receiving disable. Removes disable on initial placement. So again, I wish this wasn't just a one-time thing, but I understand why. We've got Vanish, which is stealth, and then Ward, immune to attack damage, but you're not immune to non-attacks, is what. So things like Mordred just places that effect, he doesn't actually attack you, so that kind of bypasses this. Terrify, slows divinity rate, and Vulnerable does what we are used to. Anyway, this is a very long video, but that is the list. Some very cool ones in there. Again, some that I'd like to see more of to understand them a little bit better, but really cool. And yeah, I will update my site when I can. But also, I now think I have a new starter choice in Lady Jacques. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take care, look after yourselves, work hard, but as always, play harder. And I'll see you in another one soon. Cheers.